And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather again showing some light precipitation up here, north central interior back to the Arctic coast there with that very weak system there. The remains of another washed out front here, sliding a chance of moisture into Prince William Sound. Southern Kenai Peninsula tonight to about Yakutat, dry for the Panhandle. And rain tapers off for Kodiak Island and into Bristol Bay. Dry for the Aleutians here until you get out to the next system, pushing some rain as far east as Amchitka by tomorrow morning. And then for the afternoon, that weak system progresses some light rain eastward there into about Adak or Atka. Stronger winds back to the west there, mostly south of the chain though. Still a chance of snow up here in the north. Dry for the interior areas. All the way down to the North Gulf Coast. Leftover moisture could kick off a few showers here for western Prince William Sound into Portage, maybe, or Whittier, maybe Portage. Still have a chance of showers with continued easterly flow here for Kodiak Island, and also a chance of showers for the southern Panhandle, otherwise pretty good. And then for Wednesday, central northern interior, actually from areas south of the Brooks Range all the way down into Cook Inlet and northern Bristol Bay. Pretty good conditions, dry for the Panhandle, increasing chance of rain, mostly in Dixon Entrance in the afternoon with this front as it lifts northward, bringing gale force winds in some areas here, Kodiak Island waters, with definitely rain there, spreading slowly into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak, Kachemak Bay in the afternoon. Wet here for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. And for the coastal water forecast here for the south coast, south to southeast winds, or let me change that, east to southeast winds, 15 knots, central coast. East winds, 15 to 20 knots, and the north coast, stronger winds up that way, east at 20 to 30 knots with seas 8 to 9 feet. Lynn Canal, northwest winds at 15 knots, north at 10 for Stevens Passage. Variable winds at 10 knots for Clarence Strait. And then for the day on Wednesday, central and south coast of the Panhandle, east winds at about 20 knots with seas at 6 feet. North coast, east winds 10 to 15 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas. North winds 15 knots for Lynn Canal, north at 10 for Stevens Passage, and east winds 15 knots for Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 10 knots with 2 foot seas on Tuesday. Southern Cook Inlet, north winds at 25 knots, northeast 25 for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, as well as the western North Gulf Coast, east at 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Light winds for Prince William Sound. Prince William Sound on Wednesday, light winds continue, north at 10 knots, seas down to 2 feet, and northeast winds 20 to 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Gale warnings for the Barren Islands with that next front coming up, increasing those winds to 35 knots out of the northeast 30 knots, Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories continue for southern Cook Inlet, and for northern Cook Inlet, northeast winds at 20 knots. Kodiak Island tomorrow, northeast winds 30 knots, seas 8 to 9 feet. Alaska Peninsula, let's see, north to northeast winds at 15 to 25 knots. So seas running 3 to 7 feet or so. And Bristol Bay, northeast at 20, seas 3 feet. Taking a look at Wednesday, Kodiak Island, east-northeast winds 30 to 35 knots with the gales forecast to be in Shelikof Strait along with those 11-foot seas. 25-knot winds out of the northeast for Bristol Bay here and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula all the way to Cape Sarachev. And from Cape Sarachev on up to Sitkinak, northeast winds 20 to 30 knots. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, north to northeast winds of 15 knots, becoming south at 15 for Adak and Atka. Seas only 4 to 5 feet out there. And then small craft advisories, winds 25 knots there for Amchitka Island to Shemya. And for the day on Wednesday, north to northwest winds 20 knots there, Shemya to Amchitka Island, Adak and Atka, light variable winds, seas 3 to 6 feet. And for the Eastern Aleutians, variable to north winds at 10 to 20 knots. Southwest coast, let's go south of Nunivak Island there, Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Northeast winds 15 knots for Tuesday, south at 10 for the Yukon Delta coast. St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, south winds 15 knots, variable at 10 for the Pribilofs. And then for the day on Wednesday, for the southwest coast here, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. 15 out of the northeast for Norton Sound, 20 knot northeast winds St. Lawrence Island, and northeast winds up to 30 knots with 9-foot seas for the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, small craft advisories northeast at 25 knots. Chuck CC tomorrow, south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Otherwise, for the Arctic coast, east winds 25 knots, seas running 3 to 4 feet. And then for the day on Wednesday, light winds here for the Chuck CC, almost light and variable, 5 to 15 knots. And northeast winds 20 knots for the central and western Arctic coast. And variable winds 15 to 20 knots here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, with those seas running 3 to 4 feet.